Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to another video. When you think about the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history, the Great San Francisco and Chicago fires may come to mind. Maybe you think about Hurricane Katrina or Hurricane Andrew? What if I told you a hurricane in 1900 struck one of the United States' greatest cities, killing twice as many people compared to the death toll from the San Francisco fire, the Chicago fire, and Hurricanes Katrina and Andrew combined? Before we begin, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We have lots of great videos coming up that you're not going to want to miss. Again, thanks for watching. This is History You Didn't Know. When you think of Texas cities, places like Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio come to mind. These modern metropolises dominate the Longhorn State today. But it was not always that way. In the 1800s, another Texas city was booming. The gateway for European immigrants settling in the West, home to Texas's first post office, a naval base, and Texas's first city with gas and electric service. Galveston, Texas was destined to be the next great American city. Its streets filled with beautiful homes, mansions, shops, theaters, opera houses, churches, and even a cathedral approved by Pope Pius IX, the residents of Galveston saw the city as a place of near limitless possibilities in a country rapidly on the rise. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th century, the American century, Galveston was set to rise as one of the world's great international cities. But this golden era of Galveston would come to an unfathomable end just 9 months into the new century. By the fall of 1900, just under half of Galveston's population would be dead or homeless. By 1895, Galveston, Texas was a bona fide American boomtown. Its population had doubled every 10 years for nearly 7 consecutive decades and showed no signs of slowing. An economic and social center of Texas, Galveston attracted immigrants from across the world as well as Americans looking for new opportunities. In just a 30-year period, more than 250,000 immigrants arrived in America through Galveston's busy ports. It was the Ellis Island of the West, and the Strand area of the city was dubbed the Wall Street of the Southwest. Fortunes were made in cotton, banking, housing, flour and grain mills, railroads, shipping, and land development. Few American cities showed as much promise and offered as much opportunity. Throughout the 1800s, Galveston had weathered many hurricanes and tropical storms, all of which the city survived with minimal damage. With fortunes being made and many storms coming and going, a false sense of security had befallen the city. Most Galveston residents believed the city could not be hit by a strong hurricane. Isaac Klein, the director of the Weather Bureau's Galveston office, even went so far as to publish an article in 1891 that said it would be impossible for a hurricane of significant strength to hit the city. He would be proven devastatingly wrong. Not all Galveston residents had this attitude of hubris. In 1875, a strong hurricane had severely damaged the neighboring city of Indianola. The city was rebuilt, but just 11 years later, in 1886, another hurricane struck Indianola, causing many residents to permanently leave. This caught the attention of many residents in Galveston. Galveston Island, where the town of Galveston stood, was a simple sandbar island. Its high point just 8.7 feet above sea level. After the destruction of nearby Indianola, Galveston residents proposed that a seawall should be built to protect the city. The city's leaders and the majority of residents were dismissive of the idea. Klein's article claiming it was impossible for a strong hurricane to hit the city played a significant role in ensuring Galveston would make no hurricane preparations. To make matters worse, as Galveston continued its rapid growth through the 1890s, sand dunes were removed from the beaches to fill in low-lying areas for development. This eliminated nearly all protection the city had from the Gulf of Mexico and the catastrophic effects of storm surge. On September 4, 1900, Galveston's Weather Bureau began to receive warning reports from Washington, D.C. A tropical disturbance was being reported over Cuba. Due to tensions from the Spanish-American War, Weather Bureau Director Willis Moore had decided to block all telegraph reports from Cuban meteorologists. At the time, Cuba was home to one of the world's most advanced meteorological offices. To make matters worse, Moore had put a policy in place that required forecasters to clear any and all warnings with the central office before they were issued. Terms like hurricane and tornado were also avoided, as it was feared these words could cause public panic if included with warnings. This led to delays in informing the public of potentially dangerous weather, while also downplaying the potential risks extreme weather events posed. Due to the inability to track the storm over Cuba, U.S. officials believed that the hurricane had turned north and would curl towards Florida before emerging again in the Atlantic Ocean. On September 5th, just one day after Galveston had received its first warning, warnings were issued for the Florida coast. And one day after that, on September 6th, a warning was issued for Savannah, Georgia, a city nearly 900 miles away from Galveston, Texas. All the while, meteorologists in Cuba remained adamant that the hurricane would continue on a track towards Texas. Their persistence would go unheard or be ignored by American officials. On the morning of September 8, 1900, just 2 days after a warning had been issued for Savannah, Georgia again, a city nearly 900 miles away, the residents of Galveston awoke to a shoreline being battered with large swells. Notably, the sky remained only partly cloudy. Thus, few residents saw cause for concern. By mid-morning, very few residents had evacuated to the mainland, while storm clouds and rain bands began to sweep through the city with increasing ferocity. At this point, some in Galveston began to show concern for the storm. Isaac Klein himself rode on horseback along the beaches and low-lying areas of the city, warning residents about the approaching storm. It is important to note that this account by Isaac Klein, and others by his brother, Galveston meteorologist Joseph Klein, have been disputed, as no other survivors, aside from the Kleins themselves, ever corroborated their stories. Seeing the impending danger, Isaac Klein did issue a hurricane warning for Galveston. His warning was issued against protocol as he bypassed the central office in an effort to warn residents of the extreme situation immediately. By 3 p.m., and for the next 4.5 hours, water was rising steadily and flooding Galveston. By 7:30 p.m., the city was under multiple feet of seawater. Then, in the span of just seconds, according to eyewitnesses, a wall of water 4 feet high rolled across the city. Within an hour, another wall of water, this time 5 feet high, would wash across and cover Galveston. 9 additional inches of rain would fall on Galveston, Texas that day as well. By 9 p.m., Galveston was covered in more than 15 feet of water, an amount deeper than the city's highest point by more than 6 feet. While official instrumentation was knocked out early in the storm, multiple eyewitnesses reported seeing bricks, timbers, and other heavy objects airborne throughout the storm. This would indicate winds well in excess of 120 miles per hour. The crippling combination of major hurricane force winds and unheard of storm surge meant no rescue operations could take place until the storm had passed. Furthermore, the wind and storm surge worked to tear apart many multi-story buildings where residents had sought refuge. By the time the storm passed, there was not a single street in Galveston that did not suffer damage, and every bridge connecting the island to the mainland had been washed away. Electrical, telegraph and telephone communication had been completely cut off. Buildings had been entirely removed from their foundations for blocks on end. Many structures in Galveston had been built to standards believed, at the time, to be hurricane-proof. Yet, those too did not escape destruction, a testament to the intense power of the storm. 1,900 acres, an area larger than 1,400 football fields, of Galveston became known as the Area of Destruction. Nothing remained standing in this area following the storm. In the heart of the city, a 30-feet-high debris field stretched for 3 miles. Due to the destruction of the city's bridges and communication infrastructure, Galveston was unable to call for help following the storm. On September 9th, the day after the storm, a few residents found a boat that still appeared seaworthy. They took the ship and traveled to Texas City before continuing on to Houston, where there was a telegraph office. Arriving in Houston on September 10th, 2 days after the storm made landfall, a telegraph was sent to the governor of Texas, Joseph D. Sayers, and U.S. President William McKinley. It read, "I have been deputized by the Mayor and Citizens Committee of Galveston to inform you that the city of Galveston is in ruins." They reported an estimated 500 dead, a number immediately believed to be an exaggeration. Sadly, this number was an extreme underestimation of the death toll. Workers and volunteers in Houston set out by rail and ship for Galveston. They arrived to a city in total ruin. 3,636 homes were fully destroyed. More than 10,000 were left homeless, and an estimated 8,000 dead. The dead and homeless combined to be roughly half of Galveston's population of 38,000. 3 schools and the university on the island were nearly completely destroyed, as well as dozens of public buildings, including the city hall, which had been fully de-roofed. Of the 39 churches in Galveston, 25 had been fully destroyed. Perhaps the most devastating story came from the St. Mary's Orphan Asylum. As the storm approached and waters began to rise, the 10 sisters there took all 93 children under their care into the girls' dormitory. This was a newer building and believed to be sturdier. As the storm grew more intense and the children became more frightened, the sisters had the children sing Queen of the Waves in an effort to calm them. However, soon it became clear the building would collapse. The sisters used a clothesline to tie 6 to 8 children to each adult. Within minutes, the building collapsed around them. Only 3 of the 93 children and none of the 10 sisters survived. With relief efforts taking days to arrive, the survivors were met with the monumental task of rescuing who they could and burying the dead with almost no assistance. While rescue efforts were able to save many trapped in the massive debris fields, they could not reach others. Eyewitness reports indicate some trapped residents yelled for help for up to 2 days before succumbing. With 8,000 dead, burying them all was seen as an impossible task. In the first few days, dead bodies were collected by what were referred to as dead gangs. These dead gangs collected and brought the bodies to a group of 50 African American men who had been forcibly recruited at gunpoint. The bodies were then loaded onto a barge, brought out to sea, and dumped in the ocean. In all, over 700 bodies were taken out to sea. It did not take long for the Gulf currents to begin washing these bodies back onto the shore. Ultimately, fires were set up and free whiskey was given to the men recruited to burn the dead bodies. It took several weeks of burning, day and night, before they were finished. Galveston would not be abandoned. Survivors set up shelters with surplus army tents. The white tents were so numerous that the people began referring to Galveston as the White City on the beach. 17,000 people lived in these tents in the weeks following the hurricane. Just 6 months after the storm, in March 1901, 1,073 cottage homes had been built, and another 1,109 homes had been fully repaired. Donations poured in from across the country. No city gave more than the residents of New York City, with Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Pittsburgh residents also giving large sums. Citizens in Canada, Mexico, Germany, France, England, and South Africa donated as well. Clara Barton, the founder of the Red Cross, and now famous for her response to a series of disasters in the later half of the 1900s, arrived in Galveston with a group of 8 Red Cross workers. Now 78 years old, this would be the last disaster Barton responded to. Following the storm, Galveston's rise as a major American city was stunned. Development began shifting north to Houston. In early 1901, just months after the storm, huge new oil deposits were found in Texas, and in 1909 work began on dredging the Houston shipping channel, thus ending Galveston's hopes of regaining the illustrious growth it once had and permanently cementing Houston as the regional economic hub. Nonetheless, the residents of Galveston still believed in and loved their city. New residents from across the country were also attracted to the city. In 1910, 10 years after the storm, the census showed a population of 36,891, an amount only 2,000 fewer than had lived in Galveston in 1900. In 1902, the residents of Galveston voted to approve the construction of a 17 feet tall seawall. Furthermore, the Galveston shipping channel was dredged and sand was pumped onto the island, raising the island by as much as 17 feet. In 1915, a hurricane of similar strength hit Galveston. The storm brought 12 feet of storm surge and 100+ mile-per-hour winds. Galveston's new defenses were put to the test. 53 residents would die in this storm, but the destruction and loss of life was far less when compared to the 1900 hurricane. In 1961, Hurricane Carla struck the island. The Army Corps of Engineers estimated that the sea wall prevented over $100 million in damage. Yet, the battle to protect Galveston from powerful storms continues today. In 2008, Hurricane Ike struck the city, causing an estimated $2 billion in damage from flooding and storm surge. This has led to renewed efforts to improve sea walls and floodgates in the area. To this day, the 1900 Galveston Hurricane, an event that happened over 120 years ago, remains the deadliest natural disaster in U.S. history. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. We'll see you next time for more History You Didn't Know.